right, guys. So if you would like to acknowledge someone that you know who passed from COVID this year, you can go ahead and post the name in the comments below, and I'll go through to acknowledge that individual. You can also I'm also going to check the other posts as well to make sure that I capture everybody who may have posted on that one as well. So let me go ahead and jump over to that too, because I want to get to that. I hope you guys are doing okay. I wanted to do this because I feel, and I'll share why. I feel like this year, first of all, we lost a lot of people this year, right? I think we lost a lot of people this year. Some people may have passed from COVID. Some people may have passed from other conditions or issues. But regardless, I think we have a lot of people who have passed from COVID. And I don't feel like it's, a lot of families didn't get a chance to honor their loved ones in the way that they would have appreciated. And a lot of people had to deal with, honoring their loved ones because of quarantines or because of, trying to reduce contamination or people getting sick. They had to handle things a different way. So I feel that it's important that we honor those people who we lost this year. When the year started, I was prepared. I was mentally preparing myself to lose at least 3 people, just because none of us knew enough about what was going on and everything was happening so quickly. So it was something that I think this year, especially with the virus, it was something that it caught a lot of us off guard, and we weren't ready or prepared. And, some of us were able to take action and try to avoid becoming sick, but it doesn't matter because a lot of people passed, whether they, were protecting themselves or not. It doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, a life loss is a life loss. And it's important that we acknowledge that every single human being matters. Every single person that is here with us, that is a part of our lives, that is a part of our family, even if they were people that we knew growing up, which I know several people who knew growing up have passed from the virus. So if y'all know anyone who has passed from the virus, or you want to acknowledge someone, you can, again, put their name below, and I'm going to read them out just to honor them and just to make sure that they know that we're not going to forget them, and they're still with us. They're in spirit form. They're not gone, and we will see them again when we're done here. The way that I like to think of passing over from this world to the next is kind of like retiring. When we're done with our lives here, we did our job, we did our work, we came here and did what we were supposed to do. Doesn't matter how we pass, but when we pass, it is time for us to go and reunite with the rest of our spirit family, and with Source and God in a much more direct way, or in an obviously direct way. So I first want to start off by saying that thank you to everyone who is in the medical industry, who has been helping and contributing to us getting through the last year. Because I think that the healthcare workers, people who are nurses, doctors, physicians assistants, even administrative staff, a lot of people are involved and responsible for sustaining and keeping things going, and I don't think that they get enough credit. And I think that, and not only that, but this is not to say thanks, okay, now let's move on. They're still dealing with this. They're still in the hospitals. They're still fatigued. They're tired. I have people who I know personally who are nurses, who work in medical professions, who are physicians and doctors, and it's not a joke to be in those environments and situations. Just today I was speaking with a nurse who believes she may have COVID, or because another nurse has just gotten it. And so this affects them as well. They're putting themselves at risk. I remember one of my friends who's also a nurse in the early days, she was telling me how that she would get off of her shift exhausted, and she would go home and she would have to take off all her clothes outside. I mean, she had to go through this whole song and dance just to make sure that her baby, who's like just less than a year old, was not going to be infected, because they were trying to keep the baby protected. And so a lot of people are trying really hard to protect themselves and to do what they need to do. But it doesn't, it's still, we've lost a lot of people to this. So I want to start by honoring those people. And I'm going to read a story. It's an article from a nurse who's been going through this, and I kind of want to read that, and then I'm going to say a few things. I want to read a couple of poems regarding nurses, because doctors get all the glory, even though we have doctors busting their asses trying to help us as well, but nurses don't get enough appreciation, I believe. I think nurses do a lot. They work really hard, and they deal with a lot of difficult situations and challenging situations even before COVID. So I think that nurses haven't gotten enough appreciation for the effort and the work that they've done. And in COVID, I think it's just more obvious and magnified that they've been really trying their best to keep up with everything. So here's the article that I picked out that I wanted to read to you guys, because I feel like it tells a really good story about what they're going through. Okay. So this was actually an article that was shared. So the title is by Catherine J. Wu, and COVID combat fatigue. I would come home with tears in my eyes, and this is the article here. About 2 a.m. on a sweltering summer night, Dr. Orlando Gardner awoke to the sound of a thud next to his baby daughter's crib. He leapt out of the bed to find his wife, Gabriella, passed out, her forehead hot with the same fever that had stricken him and his son, Orlando Jr., then 3. Just hours before, 2 days later, it would hit their infant daughter, Veronica. Nearly 5 months later, Gardner, a critical care physician at the Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, is haunted by what befell his family last summer. He had inadvertently shuttled the coronavirus home and sickened all of them. I felt so guilty, he said. This is my job, what I wanted to do for a living, and it could have killed my children, could have killed my wife, all this because of me. With the case count climbing again in Texas, Gardner has reoccurring nightmares that one of his children has died from COVID. He's returned to 80-hour weeks in the intensive care unit, donning layers of pandemic garb, including goggles, an N95 respirator, a protective bodysuit, and a helmet-like face shield that forces him to yell to be heard. As he treats one patient after another, he can't shake the fear that his first bout with the coronavirus wouldn't be his last, even though reinfection is rare. Is this going to be the one who gives me COVID again? He asks himself. Frontline healthcare workers have been the one constant, the medical soldiers forming row after row in the ground war against the raging spread of the coronavirus. But as cases and deaths shatter daily records, foreshadowing one of the deadliest years in American history, the very people whose life mission is caring for others on the verge of collective collapse. In interviews, more than 24 frontline medical workers described the unrelenting stress that has become an endemic part of the healthcare crisis nationwide. Many related spikes in anxiety and depressive thoughts, as well as a chronic sense of hopelessness and deepening fatigue, spurred in part by the cavalier attitudes of many Americans who seem to have lost patience with the pandemic. Surveys from around the globe have recorded rising rates of depression, trauma, and burnout among a group of professionals already known for high rates of suicide. And while some have sought therapy or medications to cope, others fear that engaging in these support systems could blemish their records and dissuade future employers from hiring them. We're sacrificing so much as healthcare providers, our health or family health, said Dr. Cleveland Gilman, an emergency medicine physician in Yuma, Arizona. You would think that the country would have learned its lesson after the spring, he said, but I feel like the 20,000 people that died in New York died for nothing. Many have reached the bottom of the reservoir, with little left to give, especially without sufficient tools to defend themselves against a disease that has killed more than 1,000 of them. I haven't even thought about how I am today, said Dr. Susanna Hills, a pediatric head and neck surgeon at Columbia University. I can't think of the last time somebody asked me that question. Dreading the darkness of winter. For Dr. Shannon Tapia, a geriatrician in Colorado, April was bad. So was May. And one long-term care facility she staffed, 22 people died in 10 days. After that number, I stopped counting, she said. A bit of a lull coasted in on a wave of summer heat, but in recent weeks, Tapia has watched the virus resurge, sparking sudden outbreaks and felling nursing home residents, one of the pandemic's most hard-hit population, in droves. This is much, much worse than the spring, Tapia said. COVID is going crazy in Colorado right now. Tapia bore witness as long-term care facilities struggled to keep adequate protective equipment in stock and decried their lack of adequate tests. As recently as early November, diagnostic tests at one home Tapia regularly visits took more than a week to deliver results, hastening the spread of the virus among unwitting residents. Some nursing home residents in the Denver area are getting bounced out of full hospitals because their symptoms aren't severe. Only to rapidly deteriorate and die in their care facilities. It's just happened so fast, Tapia said. There's no time to send them back. The evening of November 17, Tapia fielded phone call after phone call from nursing homes brimming with the sick and the scared. 4 patients died between 5 p.m. and 8 a.m. It was the most death pronouncements I've ever had to do in one day, she said. Before the pandemic, nursing home residents were already considered a medically neglected population, but the coronavirus has only exacerbated a worrisome chasm of care for older patients. Tapia is beleaguered by the helplessness she feels at every turn. Systematically, it makes me feel like I'm failing, she said. The last 8 months almost broke me. At the end of the summer, Tapia briefly considered leaving medicine, but she is a single parent to an 11-year-old son, Liam. I need my MD to support my kid, she said. It goes on and on and on. For others, the slog has been relentless. Gilman, the emergency medicine physician in Yuma, braced himself at the beginning of the pandemic, relying on his stint as a hospital corpsman in Iraq in 2004. In the military, they train you to do sleep deprivation, hikes, marches. He said, you train your body to fight an enemy. I began running every day, getting my lungs strong in case I got the virus. I put a box by the door to put my clothes in so I wouldn't spread it to my family. The current crisis turned out to be an unfamiliar and formidable foe that would follow him from place to place. Gilman's first coronavirus tour began as a resident at New York Presbyterian at the height of last spring. He came to dread the phone calls to families unable to be near their ailing relatives, hearing the same shrill cry 2 or 3 times per shift, he said. Months of chaos, suffering, and pain, he said, left him just down and depressed and exhausted. I would come home with tears in my eyes and just pass out, he said. The professional fallout of this COVID experience then turned personal. Gilman canceled his wedding in May. His June graduation commenced on Zoom. He celebrated the end of his residency in his empty apartment next to a pile of boxes. It was the saddest moment ever, he said. Within weeks, his fiancée, Maribel, their 2 daughters, and his mother-in-law had relocated to Arizona, where caseloads had just begun to swell. Gilman hunkered down anew. They have weathered the months since in seclusion, keeping the children out of school and declining invitations to mingle, even as their neighbors begin to flock back together and buzz about their holiday plans. There are bright spots, he said. The family's home, which they moved into this summer, is large and came with a pool. They recently adopted a puppy. Out in the remoteness of small-town Arizona, the desert has delighted them with the occasional roadrunner sighting. Since the spring, Gilman has become a social media tour de France to document the ongoing crisis. He began publishing journal entries on his website. His Twitter wall teems with posts commemorating people who lost their lives to COVID-19 and the health workers who have dedicated the past 9 months to stemming the tide. It's how he has made sense of the chaos, Gilman said. What he's fighting isn't just the virus itself, but a contagion of delusionment and misinformation amid which mask wearing and distancing continue to flag. It's a constant battle. It's a never-ending war, he said. Reaching the breaking point. Nurses and doctors in New York became all too familiar with the rationing of care last spring. No training prepared them for the wrath of the virus and its aftermath. The month-to-month, day-to-day flailing about as they try to cope. For some, the weight of the pandemic will have lingering effects. Shika Das, an emergency room nurse at Mount Sinai, Queens, recalled nights in mid-March when her team of 8 nurses had to wrangle some 15 patients each, double or triple a typical workload. We kept getting code after code and patients were just dying, Das said. The patients quickly outnumbered the available breathing support machines, she said, forcing doctors and nurses to apportion care in a rapid-fire fashion. We didn't have enough ventilators, Das said. I remember doing CPR and cracking ribs. They were people from our community. It was so painful. Das wrestled with sleeplessness and irritability, sniping at her husband and children. Visions of the dead strewn across emergency room cots by the dozens swarmed through her head at odd hours of the night. Medical TV dramas like Grey's Anatomy, full of the triggering sounds of codes and beeping machines, became unbearable to watch. She couldn't erase the memory of the neat row of 3 refrigerated trailers in her hospital parking lot, each packed with bodies that the morgue was too full to take. One morning after a night shift, Das climbed into her red Mini Cooper to start her 20-minute drive home. Her car chugged onto its familiar route. A song from the 2017 film, The Greatest Showman, trickled out. For the first time since the pandemic began, Das broke down and began to cry. She called her husband, who was on his way to work. He didn't pick up. Finally, she reached her best friend. I told her, these people are not going to make it. These people are not going to survive this, she said. We're there to save a person, save a life, stabilize a person so they can get further management. And here I am, not able to do that. Shortly after, she phoned a longtime friend, Andy Lynn Cornfield, a psychotherapist, who said Das was in the throes of absolute and utter acute PTSD. I have known Shika for 13 years, Cornfield said. She is one of the strongest women I have ever met, and I had never heard her like this. The sounds of silence. Long gone are the raucous nightly cheers, loud applause and clanging that bounced off buildings and hospital windows in the United States and abroad. The sounds of the public appreciation at 7 each night for those on the pandemic's front line. Nobody's clapping anymore, said Dr. Jessica Gold, a psychiatrist at Washington University in St. Louis. They're over it. Health workers, once a central part of the coronavirus conversation, have in many ways faded into the background. Some, like Gilman in Arizona, have had their salaries slashed as hospitals weigh how to cover costs. Many have guiltily recoiled from the hero label emblazoned in commercials or ad campaigns, burdened by the death march of the people they could not save and the indiscriminate path of the coronavirus. The word hero evokes bravery and superhuman strength, but leaves little room for empathy, said Dr. Nicole Washington, a psychiatrist in Oklahoma. When portrayed as stalwart saviors, health workers don't have the room or the right to be vulnerable. But the trope of invincibility has long been ingrained into the culture of medicine. Tapia, the Colorado geriatrician, began taking an antidepressant in September after months of feeling everything from angry to anxious to furious to just numb and hopeless. The medication has improved her outlook, but she also worries that these decisions could jeopardize future employment. Many state medical boards still ask intrusive questions about physicians' history of mental health diagnoses or treatments in applications to renew a license, a distinctive to many doctors who might otherwise seek professional help. Being on the front lines doesn't make health workers stronger or safer than anyone else. I'm not trying to be a hero. I don't want to be a hero, Gilman said. I want to be alive. As social bubbles balloon nationwide in advance of the chilly holiday months, healthcare workers fret on the edges of their communities, worried they are the carriers of the contagion. Dr. Marshall Florent, an internal medicine physician at Emory University, has a sense that his children, 3 and 4 years old, have grown oddly accustomed to the ritual of his disrobing out of work clothes from his scrubs to his sneakers before entering his home. I do not touch or speak to my children before I have taken a shower, Florent said. This is just how it is. You do not touch Daddy when he walks in the door. A week of vacation with his family startled him when he could scoop the little ones up in his arms without fear. I think they must have thought that was weird, he said, bracing for the next wave. Trapped in a holding pattern as the coronavirus continues to burn across the nation, doctors and nurses have been taking stock of the damage done so far and trying to sketch out the horizon beyond. On the nation's current trajectory, they say the forecast is bleak. Gina Saltzman, a physician assistant in Chicago, said she was growing increasingly disillusioned with the nation's lack approach to penning in the virus. While Illinois rapidly reimposed restrictions on restaurants and businesses when cases began to rise, Indiana, where Saltzman lives, was slower to respond. In mid-November, she was astounded to see crowds of unmasked people in a restaurant as she picked up a pizza. It's so disheartening. We're coming here to work every day to keep the public safe, she said, but the public isn't trying to keep the public safe. Since the spring, Gilman has watched 3 coworkers and a cousin die from the virus. Doss lost a close family friend who spent 3 weeks at Mount Sinai, Queens, under her care. When Florent's aunt died of COVID, we never got to bury her, never got to pay respects. It was a crushing loss. In state after state, people continued to flood hospital wards, where hallways often provide makeshift beds for the overflow. More than 12 million cases have been recorded since the pandemic took hold in the United States, with the pace of infection accelerating in the last couple of months. Jill Nayberg, a nurse at the University of Nebraska Medical Center, has spent more of 2020 in full protective gear than out of it. About twice a day, when Nayberg needs a sip of water, she must completely degown, then suit up again. Otherwise, you're hot and sweaty and stinky, she said. It's not common to come out of rooms with sweat running down your face, and you need to change your mask because it's wet. It's her 9th straight month of COVID duty. My unit is 16 beds. Rarely do we have an open eye, she said. And when we do have an open bed, it's usually because somebody has passed away. Many of her ICU patients are young, in their 40s or 50s. They're looking at us and saying things like, "Don't let me die." And I guess I should have worn that mask, she said. Sometimes she cries on her way home, where she lives alone with her 2 dogs. Her 79-year-old mother resides just a couple houses away. They have not hugged since March. I keep telling everybody the minute I can safely hug you again, get ready, she said, because I'm never letting go. So, wow. So, you hear about the people who come back from war or people who have had to deal with some of the most painful or traumatic experiences of their lives. And it doesn't take a lot to trigger that person's memory or to bring them back to a moment where they were in the middle of what was traumatic for them. So here's a few stories, because I want to include some people who I know who have passed from the virus. So when I was young, and I used to live in this neighborhood in Houston, and I used to walk over to I used to walk over to my aunt's house, and she lived on a street where like everybody knew each other, and they had neighbors that there were the Rosas, and they were like, I mean, there was a lot of them. There was a lot of them Rosas, and one of the neighbors, one of the guys, Johnny Rosas, he was a really nice guy. He was a really nice person, and when I was growing up, I was incessantly teased, and I was made fun of and poked fun of, etc. But there were always people that I met or that I knew who were very respectful and treated me like a human being. And Johnny Rosas was one of those people. He treated me like a person. He didn't treat me differently, even though, a lot of the guys knew that I was different. He didn't treat me differently. He treated me like a human being. So he's one of the guys who I know that was growing up that I knew him, and he passed away from the virus. He was actually really healthy. He tried to eat healthy and take care of himself, but he passed away. So, and that was just a few weeks ago. There's another man that I know. His name is Albert Aranzeta. And Albert, we used to call him Fat Albert because he was a really big guy. And that's just the nickname that he let us have. So when we would finish school, high school, when we would get done with school, we would have to wait for the bus to come and pick us up. And so we would walk over to his house because he lived just a couple of blocks away from the high school, from Austin, which I went to Austin High School, y'all. I'm a Mustang. So he lived just a couple of blocks away from Austin, and he had a like trampoline in his backyard, and so we all used to go over there. And I think he just liked having us around because I think like for him, we were all like us kids, myself, my cousin Jennifer, some of our friends would come with us as well. I think he never had his own kids, and he never got married, but he just liked having us around, I guess, because we just kept him company, and we just like would always laugh and joke around, and we were always like just like the funnest jokes. We would go around there and we would go jumping on the trampoline and just like laugh and make fun. And this was high school. So we were like little kids in high school. And we would always just go after school, and we would go and sit down. Sometimes we'd be on the trampoline. Sometimes we'd sit down and watch movies with him and everything until the bus would show up, and then we'd go. And I remember once he had a crawfish, like a I guess a cook-off or a cook thing, and he made crawfish. It was like they had this massive table, and they made all this crawfish, and they like cooked all the crawfish, and they threw it across the table, and like everybody was like eating from that table. So that was pretty cool. That was good. But he was a cool guy. Not a perfect guy. I mean, who's perfect? But he was still a cool guy. And I appreciated Albert because he was just a funny character all in all. And I know he's now with my tia Melba, who passed a few years back. She passed away. My closest tia, it's just like a second mother to me, honestly. And I know that they were really good friends. So I know he's up there with my tia, and also with my uncle, my tia's husband, who's also there as well. Mario Marron. I have a cousin, Mario Marron. I didn't know him personally because that's part of I have a huge family. So this is like, when you get into Hispanics, like we have huge families. And so he is a cousin. So my grandfather had he had like 5 or 6 brothers. And all the brothers had, at least maybe 2 or 3 kids, except for like, I think 2 of them. And my Uncle Tony, in Houston, we actually have a park named after my Uncle Tony. So if you ever head over to the east side, it's on the east side. And it's on, I think it's on, what is it? I don't remember, forgot what street it's on. But if you look it up, it's Antonio Marron Jr. Park. Right? So that's my uncle's park. They named it after him because he was very involved in activism for the Hispanic community in Houston. And he would speak, and he would, he was very involved with city council and the mayors and all that other stuff. So they named the park after him. And it's a really, really nice park. They remade it, they redid it, and they now it's like a really well-known soccer park right next to the bayou. And he had a son named John Marron, and my Uncle Tony, the first spirit that ever reached out to me was my Uncle Tony. And it was through a medium, interestingly enough. But his son, John, I knew John Marron as well. And then he had a son as well. And so Mario Marron. And then he also had another son named John as well. And I knew John, I knew the son John, because my uncle one of my uncles, who he was a doctor, he had a house in San Antonio, and every summer we would go to the house. And I went once because during the summertime to go stay like several weeks with him, and I would cut his grass, and I would do like yard stuff and earn money for school and earn stuff. And the John Marron, the other cousin, he was also there as well. So I knew the brother because I got a chance to spend time with him during the summertime. I didn't get a chance to really get to know Mario Marron, but he's still a cousin of mine as well. But that's another person who's passed away also. Rosie Campos. I just heard about Rosie this past week. She passed away. I didn't know her personally either, but my closest cousin, my Aunt Melba, who's passed away, my tia Melba, her daughter Monica, who's one of my closest cousins. They're related, and she knows her personally. And she was really young, Rosie. So Rosie passed away, and she was younger. And it's just a travesty because she's so young. She's just so young. Mario Marron was also young too, the cousin. He was just in his like early 30s, I think. Mr. Mondragon. I don't know Mr. Mondragon. I never met Mr. Mondragon, but he was the father of my financial advisor. So I heard about his passing from my financial advisor, and he lost his father during the summertime. So that's another person as well. My mom has a neighbor who, and this is one of the traumatic experiences. So my mom was telling me about her neighbor, where she like called them because the neighbor lives like right across the hallway, because they live in an apartment complex, and the neighbor lives right across the hallway. And the neighbor, I've known the neighbor for a while. She's been their neighbor for like almost 10 years. It's been a long time they've been neighbors. And the neighbor, she had some health conditions. I think she also had diabetes and stuff. But one day she just called them, and she couldn't speak because she couldn't breathe. She couldn't catch her breath. And so she called them. They heard her like struggling. So they went over, I think they went over to go check on her, to see her. And she was coming out of her apartment, and she just collapsed there in the hallway of their apartment. So they called the ambulance, and the ambulance, I think, took her. And when they took her, she coded, I think, on the way to the hospital. And then on the way, once they got there, I think that they let her go. So I think that they had her on life support, but they made the decision to let her go because there was no brain activity. So she passed away as well. So that's another person. I know my mom is probably traumatized from that because she had to be there and see all that go down. So that's another person as well. So that's who I personally know. I know there's a few other people, but I was just trying to remember everybody that I had a direct link to. But I didn't want to go looking for, I went to ask my mom, and she couldn't remember. My mom's memory is awful. So she couldn't remember the other people that she knew as well. But I know, there are 2 other people who passed away this week as well, but I don't know if they passed of COVID or not, and that hasn't been confirmed yet, so I didn't want to put their names here, and that's not true. But I want to make sure that they know that we haven't forgotten them also. Okay? So let me go over here and look at the names here, because I want to see the names. Sally V. Sally, we will not forget you. Debbie Jenkins, we will not forget you. Diane and Edward Jasmine, Sr., we will not forget you. Sounds like my grandparents had 16 kids. That's a lot. That's a lot of kids. Michelle says, my neighbor's cousin passed away from the virus as well. Whatever their name is, we will not forget you. Let me go over to the post, because I want to include the people that were mentioned in the post as well. Elias Starferry, she did mention she lost her dad last week. She also lost two aunts last month due to COVID complications. Steve Castillo, we will not forget you. Joel Chaparro and Barbara San Miguel, we will not forget you. Jeff Essex, we will not forget you. So there's a lot of, I know that I have several clients who have had people and they may have not seen my post yet, so that's okay. But to all the people, Selena Lynn Leon, my mom passed away from COVID. She lived in Vancouver. Selena, to your mother, we will not forget her. So for anyone who's lost someone to COVID, I think it's important that we all, in honor of those people, that we wear a mask, that we make sure people know that we have to lead by example. We don't want anyone else to lose anybody, right? We don't want anyone else to have to go through the experience of losing someone. So we need to wear a mask. We need to set the example, and let everybody know that, you know, their passing is not in vain, that they are remembered and that we will not forget them. So I'm going to read a couple of poems that I feel are really, really beautiful. Actually, you know, before we do that, actually no, let's read the poems because I want to do that first, and then we will come back to this. So these are a couple of poems that people have written regarding people in the healthcare industry. And then I want to read a passage in a book about a woman who passed away, and she describes what her experience was when she passed away and what she encountered when she kind of walked into heaven, I guess you can say. Because even though these people are past, we're not going to forget them. And not only that, we're going to see them again. I am assured of that because I get to speak to these people all the time. I get to speak to those on the other side all the time. And I think that the process of mourning and grief is so much more painful than the actual process of passing away and being there on that side. But there's a really incredible story that I want to share with you. But let me go over some of the poems because these are really, really pretty. And I saw these and I said, oh, these are really nice. This is an old woman's poem, an old lady's poem that she wrote regarding people who work in the... I think she might be the person, she might be the nurse, or she wrote about a nurse. An old lady's poem is what it's called. When an old lady died in the geriatric ward of a small hospital near Dundee, Scotland, it was felt that she had nothing left of any value. Later, when the nurses were going through her meager possessions, they found this poem. Its quality and content so impressed the staff that copies were made and distributed to every nurse in the hospital. One nurse took her copy to Ireland. The old lady's sole bequest to posterity has since appeared in the Christmas edition of the news magazine of the North Ireland Association for Mental Health. A slide presentation has also been made based on her simple but eloquent poem. And this little old Scottish lady with nothing left to give to the world is now the author of this anonymous poem, winging across the internet. Goes to show that we all leave some footprints in time. What do you see? Nurses, what do you see? What are you thinking when you're looking at me? A crabby old woman, not very wise, uncertain of habit with faraway eyes, who dribbles her food and makes no reply when you say in a loud voice, I do wish you'd try. Who seems not to notice the things that you do and forever is missing a stocking or shoe. Who is resisting or not, lets you do as you will, with bathing and feeding, the long day to fill. Is that what you're thinking? Is that what you see? Then open your eyes, nurse, you're not looking at me. I'll tell you who I am as I sit here so still, as I do at your bidding, as I eat at your will. I'm a small child of 10 with a father and a mother, brothers and sisters who love one another. A young girl of 16 with wings on her feet, dreaming that soon now a lover she'll meet. A bride soon at 20, my heart gives a leap, remembering the vows that I promised to keep. At 25 now, I have young of my own who need me to guide and a secure, happy home. A woman of 30, my young now grown fast, bound to each other with ties that should last. At 40, my young sons have grown and are gone, but my man's beside me to see I don't mourn. At 50 once more, babies play round my knee. Again we know children, my loved one and me. Dark days are upon me, my husband is dead. I look at the future, I shudder with dread. For my young are all rearing young of their own, and I think of the years and the love that I've known. I'm now an old woman, and nature is cruel. 'Tis just to make old age look like a fool. The body it crumbles, grace and vigor depart. There is now a stone where I once had a heart. But inside this old carcass a young girl still dwells, and now and again my battered heart swells. I remember the joys, I remember the pain, and I'm loving and living life over again. I think of the years, all too few, gone too fast, and accept the stark fact that nothing can last. So open your eyes, nurses, open and see, not a crabby old woman, look closer, see me. Remember this poem when you next meet an old person who you might brush aside without looking at the young soul within. We will one day be there too. You will one day be there too. So it was funny. I was like, oh girl, she's like, she's hysterical how she was like, hey, you better see me for who I am. But I think it's a reminder because I think so many of the people who are nurses and doctors and people who have to deal with people who are dying of COVID, they forget sometimes, not that they're people, but they forget the story with the person because they're so traumatized right now with how many people are passing. One of my good friends, Sandra, she had a massive heart attack during the pandemic. And I believe it's COVID related because she had some heart conditions before, but this one just came out of nowhere. And so she had a massive heart attack. And when she got to the hospital, it turned out she was positive for COVID as well. And she had to spend a couple of weeks in the COVID ward in one of the hospitals after she survived, but she had a bypass or a stent put in, or 2 stents. She says it's awful. She says it's awful. She says she would not wish this on her enemy because she had to be kind of squished into spaces with other people. She says the alarms were going off all night. She says before this, she had heard about these things, but she couldn't really relate to it. And she says she, without a doubt, knows that this is really happening and this is real because she was seeing how many people were being affected by being in the hospital and by also seeing and hearing the alarms going off all the time in the ward that she was in. But she says she wouldn't wish it upon anyone. And she says because there were so many people being stuffed into the different rooms because they were running out of space that it's not like you have a lot of privacy. It's not like you have the opportunity to just go and like have privacy to yourself. You're with other people, and people are coming in and going out because people weren't making it or surviving. This is a nurse's prayer. This is another but this is also by an unknown author. I dedicate myself to thee, O Lord, my God. This work I undertake alone in thy great name and for thy sake. In ministering to suffering, I would learn the sympathy in thy heart did burn. Take then mine eyes and teach them to perceive the ablest way each sick one to relieve. Guide thou my hands that their touch may prove the gentleness and aptness born of love. Bless thou my feet, and while they softly tread, may faces smile on many a sufferer's bed. Touch thou my lips, guide thou my tongue, give me a work in sermon for each one. Clothe me with patience, strength all task to bear. Crown me with hope and love, which know no fear. And faith, that coming face to face with death, shall in it inspire with joy the dying breath. All through the arduous day my actions guide, all through the lonely night watch by my side. So I shall wake refreshed with strength to pray. Work in me, through me, with me, Lord, this day. I think a lot of people who are in the industry, healthcare industry, are probably waking up just asking God to be with them. And I think that's all that people can do in this situation. They can just ask God to be with them and to allow them to themselves to be used as best as they can. Even some of these people who are nurses and doctors, like some of them who they want to stop, they want to quit, they're tired, they want to stop, but they don't because for this reason or that reason, but they may not know that they're being used by the hand of God and that they still serve a purpose, and the purpose that they serve is something beyond anything that they can understand in the moment. And so it's an interesting place to be in mentally and emotionally. This is dedicated to the people lost. To those whom I love and to those who loved me, by Anonymous. When I am gone, release me. Let me go. I have so many things to see and do. You mustn't tie yourself to me with too many tears. But be thankful we had so many good years. I gave you my love, and you can now only guess how much you've given me in happiness. I thank you for the love that you have shown, but now is time I traveled on alone. So grieve for me a while. If grieve you must, then let your grief be comforted by trust. It is only for a while that we must part, so treasure the memories within your heart. I won't be far away, for life goes on, and if you need me, call and I will come. Through you, though you can't see me or touch me, I will be near, and if you listen with your heart, you'll hear all my love around you, soft and clear. And then when you come this way alone, I'll greet you with a smile and a welcome home. And this other one is All Is Well by Henry Scott Holland. Death is nothing at all. I have only slipped into the next room. I am I and you are you. Whatever we were to each other, that we are still. Call me by my old familiar name. Speak to me in the easy way which you always used to. Put no difference in your tone. Wear no forced air of solemnity or sorrow. Laugh as we always laugh. I laugh because that word was hard to say. Laugh as we always laughed, as the little jokes we enjoyed together. Play, smile, think of me, pray for me. Let my name be ever the household word that it always was. Let it be spoken without effect, without the trace of shadow on it. Life means all that it ever meant. It is the same as it ever was. There is unbroken continuity. Why should I be out of mind because I am out of sight? I am waiting for you, for an interval somewhere very near. Just around the corner, all is well. I think that's the enduring message that those who have passed give us all the time, especially when I do readings with people, when I talk to people. They want us to know that they're with us. They want us to know that we can talk to them and they can hear us. And I know this to be true because they are always talking to me. So don't feel like you can't speak to them as if they're right there, because the moment you think of them, the moment that you have them in your mind, and the moment you speak, even in your thoughts you speak, they hear you. They know your thoughts. They know what you're saying. And so speak to them. You may not hear them speak back to you. Some of you may, but they will find a way to let you know that they got the message. They will find a way to tell you that they know what you said to them. So speak to them. Speak to them, speak to them, speak to them. Pretend that you have a phone that has a one-way message account. You can only send messages out, but your loved one doesn't have the credits in the physical life to send the messages back, and just send them messages. Speak to them. They will find a way to let you know that they're still with you and that they're still very much a part of our lives, even if they're not engaging directly with us in this form. I'm going to read a little passage, and then this passage is by, it's an interesting book. It's by Anita Modrani. Marjani. And the book is called Dying to Be Me, My Journey from Cancer to Near Death to True Healing. The day I died. Oh my God, I feel incredible. I'm so free and light. How come I'm not feeling any more pain in my body? Where has it all gone? Hey, why does it seem like my surroundings are moving away from me, but I'm not scared? Why am I not scared? Where has my fear gone? Oh wow, I can't find the fear anymore. These were some of my thoughts as I was being rushed to the hospital. The world around me started to appear surreal and dreamlike, and I could feel myself slip farther and farther away from consciousness and into a coma. My organs were beginning to shut down as I succumbed to the cancer that had ravaged, devoured my body for the past 4 years. It was February 2nd, 2006, a day that will be etched in my memory forever as the day that I died. Although in a coma, I was acutely aware of everything that was happening around me, including the sense of urgency and emotional frenzy of my family as they rushed me to the hospital. When we arrived, the moment the oncologist saw me, her face filled with shock. Your wife's heart may still be beating, she told my husband, Danny, but she's not really in there. It's too late to save her. Who is the doctor talking about? I wondered. I've never felt better in my life. And why do Mom and Danny look so frightened and worried? Mom, please don't cry. What's wrong? Are you crying because of me? Don't cry. I'm fine. Really, dear Mama, I am. I thought I was speaking those words aloud, but nothing came out. I had no voice. I wanted to hug my mother, comfort her, and tell her that I was fine, and I couldn't comprehend why I wasn't able to do so. Why was my physical body not cooperating? Why was I just lying there, lifeless, a limp, when all I wanted to do was to hug my beloved husband and mother, assuring them that I was fine and no longer in pain? Look, Danny, I can move around without my wheelchair. This feels so amazing, and I'm not connected to the oxygen tank anymore. Oh, wow, my breathing is no longer labored, and my skin lesions are gone. They're no longer weeping and painful. After 4 agonizing years, I'm finally healed. I was in a state of pure joy and jubilation. Finally, I was free from the pain caused by the cancer that had ravaged my body. I wanted them to be happy for me. Why weren't they happy? My struggle was finally over, that their struggle was over. Why weren't they sharing my jubilation? Couldn't they see the joy I was feeling? Please, there must be something you can do. Danny and my mother pleaded with the doctor. It's only a matter of hours for her, the oncologist argued. Why didn't your other doctors send her to us earlier? Her organs are already shutting down, and that's why she has slipped into a coma. She won't even make it through the night. You're asking for the impossible. Whatever we administer at this stage could prove too toxic and fatal for her body, as her organs aren't even functioning. Well, maybe, Danny insisted, but I'm not giving up on her. My husband held my limp hand tightly as I lay there, and I was aware of the combination of anguish and helplessness in his voice. I wanted more than anything to relieve him of his suffering. I wanted him to know how wonderful I was feeling, but I felt helpless in trying to convey it. Don't listen to the doctor, Danny. Please don't listen to her. Why is she saying that? I'm still here, and I'm fine. Better than fine. In fact, I feel great. I couldn't understand why, but I experienced what everyone was going through, both my family members as well as the doctor. I could actually feel their fear, anxiety, helplessness, and despair. It was as though their emotions were mine. It was as though I became them. I'm feeling your pain, darling. I can feel all your emotions. Please don't cry for me, and tell Mom not to cry for me either. Please tell her. But as soon as I started to get emotionally attached to the drama taking place around me, I also felt myself being simultaneously simultaneously pulled away, as though there were a bigger picture, a grander picture that was unfolding. I could feel my attachment to the scene receding as I began to realize that everything was perfect and going according to plan in the greater tapestry. It was then that the realization truly set in that I was actually dying. Oh, I'm dying. Is this what this feels like? It's nothing like I ever imagined. I feel so beautifully peaceful and calm, and I feel healed at last. I then understood that even if my physical body stopped, everything is still perfect in the greater tapestry of life, for we never truly die. I was still acutely aware of every detail unfolding before me as I observed the medical team wheeling my near lifeless body to the intensive care unit. They were surrounding me in an emotional frenzy, hooking me up to the machines while poking and prodding with needles and tubes. I felt no attachment to my limp body as it lay there on the hospital bed. It didn't feel as though it were mine. It looked far too small and insignificant to house what I was experiencing. I felt free, liberated, and magnificent. Every pain, ache, sadness, and sorrow was gone. I was completely unencumbered, and I couldn't recall feeling this way before, not ever. I then had a sense of being encompassed by something that I can only describe as pure, unconditional love. But even the word love doesn't do it justice. It was the deepest kind of caring, and I'd never experienced it before. It was beyond any physical form of affection that we can imagine, and it was unconditional. This was mine. Regardless of what I'd ever done, I didn't have to do anything or behave a certain way to deserve it. This love was for me, no matter what. I felt completely bathed and renewed in this energy, and it made me feel as though I belonged, as though I'd finally arrived. After all those years of struggle, pain, anxiety, and fear, I had finally come home. And that's what it is. It's home. It's going back to home, to where we are from and to where we belong and where we will go when we are done here. I've had the opportunity to visit there a few times when I've slept. And every single time it's almost the same. Every single time it is almost like it reminds me of here, but it's not, because it doesn't feel like solid, but it feels like it's exactly what it was supposed to be before this existed. So it's kind of a weird experience. I had a chance to visit my uncle, the doctor, who he showed me his place in heaven before he passed away here in life. And every time I go there, it's always white. And I think it's because maybe that's what I believe, but everything was white. He was like in this beautiful home. It looked like a mansion and everything was white. And he was having a party, and that's what he used to do. He always used to have big parties whenever we would go every summer, whenever we would visit. And this is the uncle who was the doctor who I used to go and stay with during the summertime. But before he passed, he was already like out of his body. Even though in life he was in a coma, he was already having his party. And it was awesome. I went there and he was just so happy, and he was his old self again, the version of him that I think he was when he was at his happiest. So that was one time. I had another uncle who he was going on a cruise ship, is what he said. So before he passed, and he was also passing away, he was like, whenever you're getting ready, like when you're in an airport and you're getting ready to get on a plane, like there's an area where you're kind of waiting. He was in a waiting area ready to get on his trip, and it was a cruise ship, and he was so excited because he had never apparently been on a cruise ship, but he said it was going to be like a cruise ship, and he was so excited. He was finally going to get to experience it, and he was waiting in the waiting area for his cruise ship, and then he ended up passing away a few days later. So he apologized for some things that he had done when he was alive, and so that was another experience that I had as well. My sister, she was raised by an uncle who I didn't really care for. I loved him, but I didn't really care for him. And she was raised by one of my uncles. And so after he passed away, because he passed away when she was a teenager, and she's, she made something of herself in her life, and she's, gone on and done quite a bit of good things for herself and built herself up. And I'm the closest thing to a father to my sister, because I'm not like authoritative figure or that authority person in her life that represents that father energy. But that was really her dad. I mean, my uncle was really the guy who raised her. He loved her, absolutely loved her. And one night he had me visit him, and I went, and again I went to his house in heaven, and his house was again this mansion that was like huge. It was white again, but he had all of the things he was proud of just scattered around in his home and in heaven. And he had trophies and things he achieved when he was in the service. So he had all of his awards and all of the things that he was proud of that he accomplished in his life. And then on one of the frames that he had up, it was almost like this pride and joy for him. He had my sister's college diploma just like on the wall in his home in heaven. So he walked me around and showed me all these things, and then he stopped me there and he showed me, and that was the last thing he showed me. And then that was it. I woke up. So the next day I was having lunch with my sister, and I told her, and I said, I got a visit from Theo last night, and I know that he's really proud of you. And she was like, how do you know? And then I told her the story. So when we got to the part where he showed me her diploma, she just broke down and cried, because she was like, she felt that pride ship that he had, and it made everything to her, because it made her feel like he knew what she had gone through and what she had achieved for herself. So I know personally that they keep up with us and they know exactly what we're up to. And if we're worried about something or we're going through something, they know. And you don't have to feel like they're away, because they really aren't. They're with us. That's why I say, they don't disappear. We don't just disappear and go away. They are with us, and we're going to see them again. So again, thanks guys for tuning in and for participating. And, for those of you who did lose someone, my heart goes out to all of you, because no one should have to lose anyone to this. And, for those of us who are here, who understand, who have had the experience of losing someone or know someone who was lost to this, let's set the example. Let's make sure that people know that we don't want to lose anyone else. And we need to do whatever we need to do to protect ourselves and protect our loved ones, so that we can give them the best opportunity to go forward, so that they don't have to suffer the same experience that we have had others experience. Okay. I love you all very, very much. I am wishing you all the very, very best. And I hope y'all have a good rest of your weekend. I hope y'all have a good weekend.